get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Nope, you are not dreaming. You did not miss a Lions game over this weekend, but nope, you are not dreaming. This is a actual episode of the Kneecaps for Breakfast podcast. Vince Progar kicking it with Phil Byrne. Phil, how'd you spend your Sunday?
Honestly, just very relaxed day. There was not really a whole lot going on. It was a little warmer outside today. I was able to get outside for a little bit, take care of some errands. Last Sunday had a bit of a final nail in the coffin for the football season for me. We'll get into the Super Bowl a little bit, in this episode, but it's full offseason mode. So it almost kind of felt like, the Super Bowl is just kind of its own event separate from everything else. And it didn't seem out of place that there is no football today, just with the way the season ended on the Lions side. But yeah, today with the weather and everything, it was a good day to kind of take care of some errands, and it was enjoyable outside, mid-40s at some point. So yeah,
but definitely that now what feeling, kind of like what we had a week ago, kind of left to pick things up as it were, kind of the same today. Like, what the heck am I going to do with a perfectly sunny Sunday? I mean, it just had all sorts of weird thoughts. And I saw a neighbor across the yard outside grilling this evening while we were out with the dog. And I was like, what the heck? If I had a brain, I would have grilled out tonight too. But that's the way it works sometimes. But yes, this is another episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. And as we touched on in previous episodes, this is something that we plan to carry year round. I mean, when you think about it, the NFL really is a year-round enterprise. Coming up here later this month, we got the NFL scouting combines, which is then going to move into the start of the new league year and free agency and all the business decisions that go along with that, contracts and what have you. Then you're moving into the NFL draft, offseason OTAs, then a little bit of a lull for the summertime, and then we pick right back up with training camp, and then it's time for the season again. So really there is something to talk about at any point of the calendar year. So just because the Lions are not actively playing, not to worry. We do have plenty of exciting content to keep you interested and keyed in on all things Lions in the NFL as we move forward. So, Phil, I kind of want to use our first bites here to kind of look back from a week ago, and how has your mindset kind of changed or evolved since we last talked last week?
If you caught the last couple of minutes of the podcast, it was so easy to kind of have a downer mentality, right? At the very end, though, of the podcast, I tried to put a positive spin on things. Now, with days removed, a week removed from everything that happened out in Santa Clara, Vince, I'm absolutely tickled with where we're at, with everything that we've endured as a Lions fan. To know what's on tap, what is getting built, the resources that this team still has to play with, the foundation that is in place from top to bottom, with nothing like, oh, that's a little bit of a leak, with the coaching staff, or that's a little bit of a leak in the front office, or the roster really isn't there. No, this is like a 5-star unit, basically, from, personnel to coaching staff to front office. And this is so unprecedented that we're venturing into the unknown. We really, really are. And it's so weird because you get caught up into the minutia of the week-to-week look at the NFL. And then, of course, the playoffs happen, and you're taking it one step at a time, and you don't want to, take in too much. But I'm taking a positive spin on things. I really, really am. We're, of course, still planning to do this podcast, as you mentioned, every single week. And, hey, I know some weeks aren't going to have as much coverage or news or anything like that, but I think people are going to want to digest Lions coverage 52 weeks out of the year. They already have, but now it's more unprecedented that we're, dare I say it, right now, looking like an elite franchise.
No question about
The
that.
Detroit Lions, an elite franchise.
There's absolutely no question about that. And I will admit it took me a few days before I even tuned into other radio shows to kind of gauge the temperature of what the feeling around the Motor City was as far as their immediate thoughts after the game. You know, really, I didn't care what anybody else thought. And what amazed me the most is that you heard 50 different opinions from 50 different people over who was responsible and why things went the way they did and this and that and the other stuff. And I think that was kind of a nice microcosm of the whole situation in that 50 different things went wrong for the Detroit Lions in the second half of that game. And it's just a matter of spin the wheel, and whatever it landed on probably played a big part into how that all went down. And part of it still doesn't feel quite real, that 23 minutes left in the game that held a multiple touchdown lead, and it kind of just evaporated right then and there. And I'll be completely frank, I have not gone back and watched so much as a highlight from that game. I've kind of left the past in the past, and I'm sure there's going to be a point where I go back and start watching some highlights and maybe start to break some things down at more of a ground level as far as how that game went. But I've kind of chosen to make my own reality of the situation. I'm kind of in your camp, Phil, in that we kind of need to look back and say, hey, it's very rare, if not impossible, to start from the ground and make it all the way up to the mountaintop just like that. Nobody really anticipated they would be in the situation that they were, being that close to a Super Bowl, knowing full well that they are still a handful of pieces away, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And we didn't know what was going to be the situation with the coaching staff. And we're going to kind of make that a part of the first part of our podcast today, is how this coaching staff looks moving forward. And we'll kind of get into that right now here. So the biggest story of the week in my mind is that Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions, will remain offensive coordinator for the Lions after being arguably the front runner for the Washington Commanders head coaching job. 37 years old, made a pretty meteoric rise up the rankings in the sexy name for a head coach. And it seems to me, Phil, that in recent years, these young guys will jump at any opportunity they can to be a head coach. For one reason or another, Ben Johnson kind of bet on himself, and he'll be coming back to run this offense for at least another year, Phil.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that he's still in his kind of mid to late 30s. He's still got plenty of time to grow. Let's not forget that he did not have a full 3 seasons as the offensive coordinator. The former offensive coordinator's name is escaping me.
Anthony Lynn.
Anthony Lynn. There we go. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure he just stopped coaching. I think
he's somewhere right now. I think he's like a running backs coach or a run game coordinator. I remember him seeing out. So he's doing something, but yeah, he hasn't called any plays, since he left here.
But yeah, no, when the Lions offense sort of hit that elite level in the NFL, and every single game, every single analyst kept breaking down, look at what Ben Johnson is doing. Look at how he's different. The Dan Orlovsky's of the world, through the ESPN coverage, and, looking at how he's helped Goff and just really steadied the ship of the Lions offense. I absolutely thought that, Ben Johnson to the Commanders, when they hadn't named a coach throughout a couple of weeks through the playoffs, I thought it was a foregone conclusion.
It felt like they were waiting around for him. There was no hint of anything else taking place out there, in the greater DC area. And it seemed, like you said, a foregone conclusion.
Well, and if they really wanted Dan Quinn, I mean, they could have had him, a couple weeks prior. Right. So, no team is ever going to say that they hired their plan B, because you want to have the coach coming in there that he is the plan A hire, right? And you don't want to be in that kind of mindset already chipping away. I think there's a lot of different elements to why Ben Johnson is returning. I think when you, as a play caller, have a first half where everything was firing on all cylinders in an NFC Championship game, to have the second half be a mere opposite of it, I think it's absolutely unfinished business for him. And, Amon-Ra St. Brown, spoke very highly of him returning back. Um, I don't know if you want to get into this now or if you want to save this later in the show, with just where the Commanders' mindset was and kind of Adam Schefter's coverage of it. But I did find it a little interesting. I guess before we get into that for a minute, though, as a North Carolina native, I kind of figured that if it wasn't going to be the Commanders, okay, well, maybe, the Panthers would, give him the job. But it also seemed like their ownership situation is a little bit of a muddy water situation where it's just not an ideal situation for a first time coach to go into. They have the Tampa offensive coordinator Canellis going up there, but he wanted to return to Detroit. He saw that regardless of what the pay might have been, what he may have requested, the opportunity to lead a team that he believes is Super Bowl caliber, that has the weapons at his disposal, and then just to kind of, hopefully write that next chapter and punch our ticket, finally into the Super Bowl, I think is really what drew him back.
And I definitely think it's a one in the hand is better than two in the bush situation for Ben Johnson for reasons that you pointed out. You got your quarterback, you got a running game going, you got a passing game going. Things are definitely more than moving in the right direction at this point. And the unfinished business thing that you pointed out definitely has to play into it at some point, being so close and knowing that continuity more than anything else is so important in the NFL. You kind of saw what happened with the Philadelphia Eagles this past year. So they're a team that did play for a Super Bowl, came up short. You lose your offensive coordinator from last season and Shane Steichen, who went on to be the Indianapolis Colts head coach. You lose your defensive coordinator in Jonathan Gannon, who comes to be Arizona Cardinals head coach. And they just seemed really out of sorts the entire season. And their head coach, Nick Sirianni, kind of took on more of the CEO role, and his niche is offense, and he wasn't the offensive play caller, kind of delegated that out to his first year coordinators, and that did not go well. And I think that just goes to show that having continuity amongst your coordinators really is paramount year over year. And I think that this was, after what happened Sunday, this was the best possible news that could have happened within 48 hours of that football game.
It's also so strange, too, just looking at these coaching cycles or carousels, if you will, where we think a team might go when they let a coach go. Some of the candidates that we think they, might entertain an interview, where they are through the thought process, and then who ends up getting the job. I think it's really, quite interesting that, New England did what they did, promoting Gerard Mayo.
I think that was in his contract, wasn't it?
Something it was
like that.
But it's really weird that you would basically give a unproven commodity, even if he was really respected within the organization and the coaching structure, instead of reaching back out to Mike Vrabel, who has that head coaching experience and then was within the Patriots organization, right? That it plays out that way. Of course, Bill Belichick didn't land a role either.
You surprised?
I am. Although the last 2-3 seasons, really, it just something has not quite been there, and I think it's almost kind of one of those things that I'm sure whatever general manager brought him in, whatever front office individual brought him in, I think it would have been probably very difficult, unless you came from the same mindset or had his respect previously, to meet him on a lot of personnel decisions. So I could see where that is. And quite honestly, I think had the Cowboys pulled the trigger, I think he'd be the Cowboys coach. We kind of led into that after the Cowboys were eliminated. So that's kind of interesting as well. But hey, it's really, really unproven, and kind of brings us back to the Lions here, that obviously Dan Campbell had the playing experience as a Lions tight end for I think a year or two. It wasn't a long period of time, but everyone kind of had their own certain targets that they thought the Lions were going to go after, and some of them went elsewhere. And hey, we got Dan Campbell at the end of the day, and it worked out perfectly. So there's no proven, really method of how all of it's supposed to work out. A lot of it is okay. Are you getting a general manager and then a coach? Is there already, a general manager that needs to get hired as well? So it's quite interesting, how these things always play out.
And obviously hindsight's 2020 with all these things. So it's kind of nice to see that this particular situation seems to be working out with, you talk about the front office structure. It's not like Brad Holmes went out and hired Dan Campbell. Both those hires were made almost simultaneously from ownership. And it's really nice to see that the two of them, Holmes and Campbell, are able to work in such lockstep. I think that was actually Campbell's word used was lockstep. And I think you can really see it from the top down and just how important that being in lockstep and the continuity is. Speaking of continuity, we kind of touched on Ben Johnson a little bit. Aaron Glenn, also the defensive coordinator for the Lions. The music stopped in the head coaching musical chairs, and there was no chair for him when the music stopped. So he will be back as the Lions defensive coordinator. Your thoughts on getting him back for another go round?
Yeah, so I think they're kind of different commodities, right? You've got Aaron Glenn, who's a former player, former All-Star, or excuse me, former Pro Bowl player at his part. One that, I think if you look at the Lions and just sort of like, without looking at stats, obviously, the offense is better than the defense. But what Aaron Glenn was able to scheme up and have a top ranked rush defense is no joke, with basically, a defensive line that consists of basically, Hutch and Aleem McNeil, and then, some kind of scrap pieces along the way. They had Tyson Alualu, how long has that guy been in the NFL and for how many teams, right? So he was getting decent minutes in the NFC Championship game. But he's returning, and I think it is a great opportunity for him to really kind of assess what went wrong on the outside corner and at times the pass rush, right? And why those two specific units struggled. I would venture that Brad Holmes is going to give him some more pieces to play with. I think just about every mock draft you're seeing so far from the Lions has them taking a corner in the first round. At that, so what is it, pick 29? I think. Yeah, yep. At pick 29. So I think it's one of those things that he's back. Obviously, hey, continuity is good. You're not going to, say, hey, now we're going to have you be our, secondary coach or anything like that. No, like he got these interviews for a reason. He's respected within the league. Even if from a fan's perspective, they might view Johnson as like the candidate that would, have probably been more likely to land a head coaching role. It's no mistake that the Lions are good with this coaching staff. And I'm glad that we don't have to follow up that season and then think, okay, so who's taking over what? Is this going to be actually the defensive coaches? I can't think of all their names off the top of my head, but is it going to be like Mark Brunell as the offensive coordinator, or Antoine Randall, or I think Tanner Engstrom? I think he's like a passing game coordinator.
Yep.
Yeah. Are we having to roll with one of those guys as the offensive coordinator? We don't have to worry about that. We're getting continuity, and quite honestly, after the season that we put together, that's what you want.
So obviously, Ben Johnson, as you said, is kind of the bigger deal because the offense was the strength of this team last year and looks to be the strength of this team moving forward. That is not, in my mind, without any type of other implications moving forward, though. So what I feel like is that now that you have Ben Johnson back in the fold for 2024, I almost feel like that forces the Lions' hand with the decision at quarterback moving forward. I think that at this point, knowing that you do have Ben Johnson back for that third full year, bringing Jared Goff in and getting him signed to an extension early on this offseason is not only a no-brainer, it's an absolute must.
It's an absolute must. It absolutely is. You're not going to win the Super Bowl next year with Hendon Hooker. Like, potential aside, it's Jared Goff's team. It's Jared Goff's city. I would say right now he might be the most popular athlete in Detroit, with the chants that are going.
Jared Goff.
Right. You can't help it. I mean, and the city absolutely loved that. He was our quarterback, and Stafford family, be damned. He showed why the city has embraced him. Here locally in Southeast Michigan, I saw a Southeast Michigan Ford dealer commercial with Jared Goff. I think it was the Ford F-150. So he's a Ford pitchman now, right? So I think it's only fitting that they get this thing done. It doesn't have to be like a 6-year contract or anything super, super long term. I think you're probably looking at, probably 4 years, probably, and a sizable chunk of change, obviously, to make him one of the highest paid players in the league. But it is so fluid with how quickly these things change that within 2 years, it'll probably be kind of average salary.
And that's why I kind of think that they need to kind of get on this train early on, because I have heard some rumors that Jordan Love is going to be up for an extension here pretty soon. So if you can kind of get out ahead of it and don't let Jordan Love kind of set what that number is for this next round of quarterback extensions. I mean, you pointed out it's all going to be obsolete here in the next year or two once that number continues to get reset year after year. I think Mahomes now has a stipulation where he, over the next X number of years, it's going to be in his contract to where his overall value of his contract, I think, has to be either top in the NFL or like top 3 in the NFL. Or so I think there's some type of stipulation there. But I think that you're kind of in that middle zone between what your top guys are getting paid. So what Mahomes is getting, what Lamar Jackson got a year ago, the monstrosity of a contract that is Deshaun Watson's. I think you're somewhere between that and like the $40 million that Daniel Jones got. I believe that was last season. He got extended, which again, that aged real well, didn't it?
But, my God.
So where does that put you? I think that puts you right around somewhere between 48 to $50 million a year. And I know that a lot of people out there listening to this podcast are thinking, why so much money, for a guy that, you can't depend upon to pick up a 5-yard first down with his legs, or a guy that can get a 50 air yards pass. I do know that's a lot to, that's a lot to digest for the people who are on the fence about that. But again, the word I keep coming back to this whole situation is continuity. And I think having a guy who's been in the same offense for a number of years, knowing that he's going to have the same guy running this offense next year, and knowing that you've got a guy who has made it perfectly clear he wants to be in Detroit. He's had the time of his life here in Detroit. He loves the coaching staff. He loves the Ford family. He loves the fans. I think that's more valuable than just trying to see what's behind curtain number 2, because he's not a huge threat with his legs and he can't throw the ball 85 yards downfield.
Yeah. And as this team is constructed, and it's constructed through the draft, you're going to have to give extensions to, here we go, Hutch, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, probably an Aleem McNeil, probably a Melifonwu. Brian Branch is looking real good. Oh, hey, Sam Laporta's looking really good. Every single draft pick that we have hit on, that if you want them to be long-term Lions, at some point you're going to have to talk extension. Now, Branch and Laporta, obviously they're rookies. You got plenty of time to wait on them. But guys from those first 2 draft classes under Brad Holmes, it is absolutely extension time with them as well. I think you start with Goff and you start with Penei Sewell. Those are premium positions. So, I mean, it's going to cost a lot, but that's where these general managers make their money is, okay, so what premium talent do we need? What are we going to allocate funds for? How is this team going to be constructed? Not going to be able to keep everyone, right? No team can. So,
But you have to
you
keep in mind
know,
also that the NFL salary cap continues to go up just from a raw number on its
yeah.
own. So even though you might think, well, geez, if you add that up, that's going to get us to that number awfully quick. I mean, that number is going to get higher moving forward.
Mm-hmm. It will. It will. But yeah, I really hope that I think really now until the draft, I think you got plenty of time to kind of figure out and really get this thing done with Jared Goff and ink him to this long term deal. And then um I say honestly, like, obviously you're gonna have a free agent class that you're gonna want to sign, but at the same time, I think you got to look at Sewell and St. Brown, and those are the two next guys after Goff. You got to figure something out. This offense doesn't go without St. Brown, right? He honestly might be the most underrated. I don't want to say player, but at least offensive player in the NFL. Where yes, he's made the Pro Bowl. Yes, he's made an All Pro list, but we have seen it time and time again where when he gets the ball, he is so elusive. He is so strong. He is so durable. You have to have him on the field. You look at snap counts. I mean, he averages for a receiver, usually in the 90 to 95% snap count range, which is really unheard of. He's got tremendous stamina, so he can stay out there. But he's just an absolute dog, if you will, at the receiver position. So that's the kind of the game plan that I hope Brad Holmes is looking at, and I would anticipate him to be looking at this offseason.
So I can't remember if you and I discussed this on last week's episode, or I feel like I've had this conversation with a whole heck of a lot of people over the last week here, but I almost wondered that if I'm going to pick on Goff here, if Jared Goff gets the big payday that we are all anticipating he's going to get, and let's say there's a 5 at the start of what that average value per year is. At what point do you sit him down and say, Goff, you're still 29 years old. You're not an old quarterback by any means. What do you say that we as coaches, because we as coaches coach you to do things. At what point do you maybe commit to spending a good chunk of the off season, knowing that you don't have a new system to learn or new terminology to learn or what have you, say that, Jared, one of our objectives with you this off season is to figure out how, if you need to pick up a 5-yard scramble, you're able to pick up a 5-yard scramble. Make him at least put him in a situation where the other teams at least have to be mindful that Goff could take off and pick up a first down if need be. Am I just kind of making something out of nothing here, or do you think that's something that at least a conversation should be had on that front?
So I think it's so natural to think about where Stafford is now, or excuse me, there, I just blew it right. My talking point with where Goff is now, with where Stafford was around this same age point. He was a little heftier. He lost weight and he became a little bit more durable, a little bit more light on his feet. Obviously, still not going to scramble a whole bunch, but I would say still, quite honestly, even at his age, he's probably a better run option than Jared Goff. And Jared Goff's a little bit taller, he's a little bit lankier. But you would think that weight not really being an issue with the guy, like just some honestly solid agility drills, committing to something. Lions have more than enough, weapons on the offensive side. You know what? Honestly, just put them through a workout with Amon-Ra St. Brown, like the St. Brown family and their workouts. Like, I'm sure they can come up with something. Where, listen, he's not going to get faster. You're not going to get faster at age 29. But I think there's just a way where if it's just running sprints or something like that, like there's going to be some way where in just a little 5 5-yard shuttle drill or something like that, that you can pick up a little bit more quickness, or you're just more fine-tuned. The twitchiness, it just needs to be there a little bit more. I think it's we saw it with Stafford. With him, I truly believe it was like a weight issue and kind of shedding a little bit of that. Goff doesn't have that issue. It's just, he's tall enough to where I think if you honestly just get 3 yards, you can probably slide and get the extra two. So it's not a bad take there, Vince.
I just feel like, I mean, I'm not going to nerd out with my knowledge of Iowa State football from yesteryear, but I watched a lot of Brock Purdy at quarterback at Iowa State before he made it into the NFL. And he was never a beast with his legs. And that was never his calling card once he got drafted by the 49ers, the ones who took over the starting job. What did he do a week ago? He burned us for 51 yards on the ground. And that was a situation where it caught the defense off guard because there was something they weren't expecting. And could you imagine that if that's another wrinkle that we can add to another defense's game plan of, oh, we got to watch out for the run game with the running backs, the receiving game, the tight end, the quarterback's arm. Now we have to worry about the quarterback's legs. I feel like all that can possibly do is make you a more dangerous offense. And I feel like making Goff develop somewhat of a threat in the running game is a more attainable objective in one offseason than, okay, Jared, let's see if we can get you from throwing a 25-yard pass into a 60-yard perfect spiral. I think that's getting into more reinvent the wheel territory here. Just a thought I had.
Yeah, no, I think it's a solid take, and something that we're at the point of the off season where, obviously, I'm sure they've been on vacation for, after the locker clean out day, and they get a couple months to themselves here. But, I know that around draft time and stuff like that, the players really start committing to, listen, they've always got to be in football shape, but it's really the workouts. I think right around that time in April is really when they start to pick up, just so that when training camp rolls around, it's, like nothing ever happened. So.
Did you, by chance, I don't want to get too far down this road here, but did you, by chance, happen to tune into any of the Pro Bowl events featuring a few of the Lions?
So it was on at the gym, but no, I could honestly care less. I think that I saw a video of something. Was it a Penny Sewell and Hutch in a relay or something like that?
Yeah, they were doing this.
Yeah.
It's like an obstacle course where the guy, some guys started off running through these big, almost like plaster walls, so to speak, that like increased in how basically thick and robust they were as you went along. And then after that, they did like a little agility course, which then went into a, big, gigantic, heavy tire. You had to move the, flip the tire along. And then after that, they went in like a high jump thing where you had to, I think, knock a football off a pedestal that got higher and higher off the ground. So Hutch participated in that. And then after that finished, it went into a blocking sled. You had to move a blocking sled. So it was Sewell and one other guy, I forget who. So they had to move a blocking sled with weights on it. And then Jason Kelsey was standing on it too. So
Of course he was.
they had to move it across the finish line, and the NFC squad got it. So I tuned in a little bit. There was, I didn't quite get too far into the flag football part of it. But I am glad that they went to more of a layout like this for the Pro Bowl instead of playing an actual full contact game, kind of like what the NBA still attempts to do. And, oh, hey, we're about to crack 200 points in a game, one way. I think this way is a lot more laid back, and it seems like not only the guys seem to be having fun with it, which is what the idea is, but it's also getting a little bit more participation. Heck, look at the Lions. You're just days off from what happened out in the Bay Area, and I think all 5 of the guys that got chosen went down to Orlando to participate. So nice to see those guys having fun with defeat being so recent in their recent on their minds there.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only two events that I actually care about in any sort of all-star participation are the home run derby and the dunk contest, and everything else is just kind of like, no, this is not for me. At one point in time, the '90s NBA All-Star games were kind of must see. Those were always fun, especially if like Jordan was involved, or later Grant Hill from a local flavor and stuff like that. Starting to sound really old mentioning those two names in there, but and then of course the year that the Pistons had all five in the NBA starters for the East. That was a whole lot of fun. But outside of that, no, the Pro Bowl has never really done it for me. I know the Pro Bowl Barry Sanders jersey is kind of one of those Mitchell and Ness collectibles that's really, really popular. People like wearing that one. But yeah, no, they've never really done it for me. And, it's just kind of, again, it's like it just never even happened. But, I think they need to bring in kind of that younger audience. I think with like the Nickelodeon broadcast that they've had, there's an audience, if you're a kid, that something like this would be kind of exciting to watch. It's just, I don't know. It's not really.
I mean, hey, it worked for the
my
Taylor
forte.
Swift fans out there. Why can't it work for today's youth?
Yeah, exactly.
You're listening to the Kneecaps for Breakfast podcast. Vince Progar and Phil Byrne along with you. Happy you could be with us here on this latest episode. And once again, I don't want to sound like a broken record episode over episode, but just want to again emphasize how much we appreciate all your support, how much we appreciate you tuning in and liking and subscribing, and the feedback that you've continued to provide to the both of us over these last several weeks since we've started. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to continue all off season long and into next year to keep on doing this week after week. I don't know about you, Phil, but I've had a riot so far since we kicked this off, and here we are now in our 4th episode.
Yeah, I think we've been steady building this. I think you and I both agreed that we kind of wanted to keep this at a very level. Don't want to bite off more than we can chew, especially since we both have full-time jobs, and this is just sort of a passion project more than anything else. So I think one thing that I am really, really looking forward to doing is the draft is in Detroit. I did used to be a media member in Michigan. I still have some contacts that are out there. Haven't brought up the idea of a podcast to any of them or anything like that, but I know there are some people that will probably be able and willing to want to talk about the draft come draft season. So I think when there isn't a game to reflect on or anything like that, definitely got some fires in the oven to try to provide some content, right, where it might not just be the voices of Vince and myself speaking on the Lions or the NFL. So be really exciting. And then honestly, just want to keep building this out. Obviously, we are on Spotify and Google Podcasts and Amazon. Apple is a little bit more challenging to kind of get going.
A coworker informed me that we are on iHeartRadio as well. I didn't know that we wound up there, so that's cool. So that is going to be our goal moving forward here, is to kind of try and expand where you can find us. And I've been given some resources from some people that are very much in the know with podcasting and, the dispersal of said podcasts and whatnot. So that's something we promise we'll continue to do our best to make them more accessible for you, because obviously, like you said, Phil, even though you and I are having a riot doing this, we want to make it as easier for for you, the listeners, as well. So in any case, we greatly, greatly appreciate it. We kind of want to wind things down here by at least making a reference to the Super Bowl coming up next Sunday from Las Vegas. The San Francisco 49ers taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, a rematch of the Super Bowl from 4 years ago, where San Francisco had the late lead in that one, and Mahomes and the Chiefs came back to get the win. And that was the first Super Bowl for the Chiefs in their designation that we know them as, with Andy Reid and Mahomes and Travis Kelce and company at the helm. So they're going for number 3 more or less as a group here on Sunday. So I kind of want to get a gauge of where your mind is at, Phil. Your thoughts on the matchup coming up on Sunday, what you think we should be kind of on the lookout for.
Yeah, so I think it's a couple different things. I think both teams had very different paths in the NFC Championship game to arrive in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. Um, I think just where the two teams were at this point in the season, obviously the Lions taking down the Chiefs in week one. I don't think anyone at any point in the season had, when they do these power rankings, all these media experts, week to week, I'm pretty sure I never really saw the Chiefs in anyone's number one spot. But here they are. They're back. They pulled a Michael Myers, and hey, guess what? They're back in the final act. They're ready for the kill. So here they are once again. So I think that is an element that is kind of interesting. I think this is by far the worst roster that they have had. The spurts of where their offense just looks out of sync, has been there. They've got some intriguing players on offense, obviously outside of Kelsey, with Rashid Rice and Isaiah Pacheco. But it's still very much the Mahomes and Kelsey show that moves it forward. San Francisco, top to bottom, you got that balanced attack that we saw. Brock Purdy kind of coming into his own element. At what point does the Cinderella slipper fall off? Is it this game? He hasn't really shown the jitters that I think a lot of people thought would be coming from a Mr. Irrelevant. He hasn't reached that Brady echelon of where he became a late round pick that just was on an elite level. And I don't think he's like building towards that. This is still like a quarterback that hits all the right notes, but it's still very much the team aspect and not the quarterback,
Kind of call
driving
a system
around.
quarterback, or
Oh yeah, system. Yeah, all the phrases, that the Trent Dilfers and Brad Johnsons of the world had to live with for the rest of their lives, following their Super Bowls. But um, to me, I think the Chiefs are riding the hot hand coming in. What they were able to do on the road against Lamar, their defense really showed up, and I think the Chiefs' defense throughout the season, kind of kept them in some of these games. When the offense wasn't in full stride, it wasn't hitting all their notes. Chris Jones, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he might be entering a contract situation. I think, did they franchise him? Was that what it was?
yeah, but I believe they did bring him back for the year. Yep.
Yeah.
And I believe after this year is kind of up in the air for him.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he's looking at this as a huge platform, for what his next contract
An audition of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, I think even though we saw the Niners just absolutely gut us to death and rip out our hearts in Santa Clara, I think the Chiefs are riding the hot hand, and I think they are the team with the momentum. Whether or not it plays out in that factor remains to be seen. My interest in this game also is not what it has been, in years past, where from a gambling standpoint, I just kind of knew the Lions weren't going to be involved in really any particular outcome or relation with any team in the Super Bowl. And listen, hey, I'm again taking a positive outlook on things, but it kind of soured me to be that close to have a whole lot of interest in watching this game.
It amazes me how I'm kind of in the same platform. I'm going to watch because I've never missed a Super Bowl in my life, and I'm not sure that I ever will for any reason, but you almost kind of have a bittersweet type of feeling that, okay, it's great that it's a Super Bowl and you got two great teams set to go at it, but it almost feels a little almost like a sick to your stomach feeling that your team could have been there. And in years past, there was just no conceivable way whatsoever that the Detroit Lions could be anywhere near the Super Bowl. So it's not even worth letting your brain go to that point. But there's definitely some what could have been there, especially if, the Lions would have given that same effort that they gave in the first half throughout the duration of the entire game. You almost got to think that not only did they lose the right to go to the Super Bowl, they lost the whole Super Bowl itself, knowing that they have that ability to play up to a certain potential. I think we kind of saw that potential on full display in the first half of that NFC Championship game. What do I look for in the Super Bowl? I do think it's a really, really nice matchup. I think you got two quarterbacks that are able to be playmakers. Obviously, Mahomes has demonstrated it over the years, but I think Purdy in spurts has shown that he can be a playmaker, whether it be with his arm more often than not, or with his legs to a lesser degree. A phenomenal run game that San Francisco possesses, if not the best in football. But Kansas City has really shown a emphasis on getting that run game going. And I think they've been almost more of a threat in the run game this year as opposed to the passing game as they've tried to work in these young receivers. San Francisco obviously has the receivers. The tight ends is about a wash between Kittle and, albeit an aging Travis Kelce. I think both have really turned it on big in the later goings of the year. And what more can you say about these defenses? I think San Francisco's done a great job on defense all season long. And obviously they've had the ability to benefit from playing from ahead quite a bit this year. But what more can you say about what Steve Spagnuolo's done with Kansas City's defense? This is a group that has really made their money on winning games and shootouts. And it's almost the point now where if Kansas City can go out there and win a game 23-13, they're patting themselves on the back for a job well done. Who wins this game? I think Kansas City wins, and I think they win this one by double digits. I think that defense that we talked about does more than enough to make the lesser experienced Brock Purdy a little bit more uncomfortable than he would like to be in this game. And I think that the offensive firepower that Kansas City brings is just a little bit too much. I think they win this one 30-17.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I did make reference to, the Cinderella slipper and if the stage will be too big for Brock Purdy. I don't think it will be. I think at every level he's been able to show that it's not too big for him. But yeah, it's really quite interesting. One thing that I would say is probably benefiting in San Francisco's favor is the fact that again that rush defense that San Francisco had was a little weak at times. It wasn't bottom 5 of the NFL or anything, but you are able to run against them. And Pacheco as a running back, it's really more through the passing game. He can run a little bit, but that's not his forte. Forgotten guy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Almost kind of forget he's there. I
Former
wonder if
first
we
round
see
pick.
him a little bit. Yeah. So, that'll be kind of interesting. I do also expect Kansas City to win. I would say by about a touchdown. I don't think this is going to be a shootout or anything like that, but I think both teams have some formidable defenses, even if a lot of the star power in this game will be, of course, focused on Christian McCaffrey and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Deebo Samuel and you name it. There are going to be stars in the offensive side of the ball.
So obviously we're not a gambling podcast here, but to kind of try and spice things up a little bit, just to kind of make this game more of a game that's more fun to watch. Let's take a minute here to kind of toss a few prop bets that we've discovered here, and maybe just for the heck of it, see how well we did next week if we got anywhere close to these. But a few that stuck out to me was a Kansas City defense anytime touchdown at plus 700. I think the ability to create turnovers is going to be huge in a game that you've got teams that are as close as we pointed out, as far as how they are offensively and defensively similar to one another. I think the turnovers battle is going to be key, and I think that the Kansas City defense has been opportunistic enough over the course of the season where it would not surprise me if they're able to come up with a big play deep in 49ers territory or able to directly turn that into a touchdown. So Kansas City defense anytime touchdown at plus 700. I also like Deebo Samuel with the first score for the 49ers at plus 460. I think you kind of saw last week that any issue we had with that shoulder, it seems to be in a heck of a lot better shape than it was. I think with an extra week's rest in between, I think Debo will be ready to go. Debo Samuel, first score for the 49ers at plus 460. Everyone's got to have an opinion on what color Gatorade the winning coach is going to be doused in, right? I'm taking purple at plus 330.
Ooh, okay. What are the, so I don't have that one up. Did it say what the odds were for red?
Red or pink is at plus 260. So that is the favorite in the clubhouse.
Yep. Yeah. Considering both teams have red. So that's an interesting one. One that I like, this is off of FanDuel, is Chris Jones and Nick Bosa to both record a half sack each. That is at plus 290. I think that is something that can happen, especially when being a half sack. Honestly, a pressure with two guys, you can get in there and you can get that pretty easily. And let's take a look here. First offensive ball carrier recorded, or fastest offensive ball carrier recorded. So this is next gen stats, right? All right, so you got a whole bunch of names in here. So it's a lot of the fast guys. You got Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Rashee Rice. I'm just going to go with the top one. I think it's going to be Debo. I think he's the fastest guy in the game that's going to possibly get the ball. Although I will say, if you want one that's a little outside of there, Isaiah Pacheco, he's plus 820. He has that breakaway game speed as well. Debo Samuel, the favorite, at plus 610. So odds pretty favorable in that. Of course, I would assume that's just going to have to depend on, hey, let's check out next gen stats, getting that Amazon plug in there.
Of course.
But yeah, those are pretty favorable odds. So going with the half sack for Jones and Bosa, and then I will also take Debo Samuel with plus 610 for the fastest offensive ball carrier recorded.
And, so obviously I took the Gatorade color, so I'm going to throw one on you here. The leader in the clubhouse for Reba McEntire's rendition of the Star Spangled Banner is over 90 and a half seconds. You taking the over or you taking the under?
I don't know. Reba's a pro. I don't think she's going like, I don't think.
I think she's got places to go and people to see and hands to shake, right?
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know what caveat they pull into it, but Las Vegas isn't really a country town.
I feel like you get an Elvis impersonator before you can get Reba, but what do I know?
Yeah. The Killers, they're from Las Vegas.
Sure.
They're
bring Mr. Brightside back more than it already is, right?
Yeah. Anyways, but no, I don't think she's going over that. I don't think she's got really anything to plug or to market or, to want a viral moment. She's had a long and illustrious country career, but like, I don't. And we've already talked too much about Reba McEntire here, but I don't think it's going over. I think I'll take the under on that.
So let's end it now, Phil, with your score prediction in this one between the 49ers and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
I am going to go 27-20 Chiefs over the 49ers.
27-20 Chiefs over the 49ers. Okay, I've got this all written down, so when we reconvene next episode, we'll be able to look back on it and see who got it right and who came up just a little bit short. So that's going to wrap things up for this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. 4 episodes in, we've had an absolute blast. We hope you've enjoyed it just as much. We appreciate you being along for the ride. Keep continuing to like and subscribe, and we appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate you listening. We can't wait for next week's episode already. And, hey, enjoy the Super Bowl between the 49ers and Chiefs. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Forward down the field. Go Lions. Over and out.